This is the Fertility Friday podcast, episode number 19. Welcome to the 19th episode of the Fertility Friday podcast. Thank you for joining me today. I'm Lisa from fertilityfriday.com, and this is your source for information about the fertility awareness method and all things fertility. Please stop by the blog and leave a comment if you enjoyed today's show. You'll find the show notes for today's episode and all the podcasts at fertilityfriday.com/podcast. And you can find me on Twitter at fertilefriday, so please tweet me also if you enjoyed today's show. And in today's episode, I'm very excited to be talking with Nicole Jardim. Nicole is a certified women's health coach with a specialty in hormonal and reproductive health. She trained at the Institute for Integrative Nutrition and apprenticed at a women's holistic health center in New York City. And Nicole has trained with both Dr. Sarah Gottfried, the author of The Hormone Cure, and Jessica Drummond, the founder of the Integrative Pelvic Health Institute. And during her training, she learned that women can heal themselves from conditions like PMS, polycystic ovarian syndrome, endometriosis, and many other conditions that are caused by hormonal imbalances. And this is through the use of medicinal foods and lifestyle adjustments. And Nicole created her signature Fix Your Period series, which you may have heard of, in 2011, which is a series of programs that empower women to heal their menstrual conditions in a fun and sassy way. And clearly, Nicole is dedicated to helping women reclaim their hormonal health and feminine vitality naturally. So without further ado, welcome to the show, Nicole.
Thank you so much. Thanks for such a warm welcome. I'm very excited to be here with you.
Oh, I'm super excited to have you today. And so I'd love to dive right in and actually start by talking about your own experience with menstruation and kind of how you healed your own menstrual issues and basically what led you to create the Fix Your Period series and go down this road.
Yeah, I know. It's been quite a journey. Sorry about that. I just realized I have a bus stop right outside my door. It's a little loud. So
right.
Just in case anyone can hear it, it's all, that's what it is. But essentially, it all started in my teens. And I think that that's where it shows up for most people. And basically, for me, it started as irregular periods. Suddenly, my periods were just not coming anymore the way they were supposed to every single month. It was happening every 3 or 4 months, and I really had no idea what was going on, and I had no one to ask except for my gynecologist, who promptly decided to put me on the pill to address the problem because, that's what fixes things.
Of course, naturally.
Right. Of course, naturally. And so it wasn't until 3 or 4 years into using the pill in my early 20s that I realized that I had a lot of problems and that they had potentially stemmed from being on the pill. And so for me, I really needed to figure out what it was that was causing it, obviously, and get off the pill. So one of the first things I did, this was after, of course, seeing a number of Western doctors who could not help, unfortunately. But anyway, the point is that I ended up seeing an acupuncturist after a couple of years of trying to figure it all out. And he was really the catalyst for me. He changed everything. It was really one of those pivotal moments in my life where I thought, okay, this man is onto something. I'm finally on the right track. And eventually, I changed my diet. I started to stop eating, processed food and sugary foods and things like that. And I also just saw him more often. And he was really the person who led me down the path of health and wellness, not only physical, but mental and emotional as well. And once it had created that foundation, I felt like I was unstoppable. I needed to learn everything about this world and how it all worked. And I couldn't stop shopping at Whole Foods, the usual. So that was really what led me to finding the Institute for Integrative Nutrition. And that's how I studied to be a health coach. And then from there, I apprenticed, like I was saying, you said in my bio, I apprenticed with various people and studied with others. And that's what led me here today. Initially I just thought, okay, if I can help one woman, then my mission is accomplished. And clearly that's happened. And I just continue to try to reach as many women as possible with this message of empowerment that they can take control of what's going on within their bodies.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so many important elements of your story that I think many women who are listening share, because it's just such a common thing for us to end up on the pill for just a number of different menstrual-related concerns. And very obviously, the pill doesn't actually solve any of these issues.
No.
And So when you're working with women in your practice, one of the questions I wanted to ask you was, what are some of the most common reasons that women come to you? What are some of the most common health issues that you see?
Yeah, that's a good one. I would say that right now it's women in their 20s and 30s typically, and so for most of them, they're experiencing either a combination of these things or just one of these things. So it's either a PMS or painful periods, maybe even PMDD, which is the meaner version of PMS, basically. And also irregular periods, amenorrhea, which is not having a period for 3 months or more. And then a lot of people are dealing with fertility issues, but for the most part, I'm dealing with women who are really focused on preserving their fertility or addressing whatever symptoms they're dealing with. So they're not necessarily actively trying to get pregnant. They're more preparing their bodies to potentially be pregnant in the next 3 to 5 years or later on. So those are the main ones I'm seeing. And then, of course, there's PCOS, which isn't my main focus. I believe there are a couple other people who focus on PCOS, but there are a number of women who come to me dealing with that too, because symptoms of PCOS are very similar to amenorrhea and irregular periods and all of that. So there's a lot that can be done from that, from my program standpoint.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a wide kind of variety of issues that you deal with. And so that leads me perfectly to my next question, which is, do you see any common threads in these issues? I mean, they're kind of varied. There's a lot of different things in what you just mentioned, but do you see some common threads there?
Oh yeah, oh absolutely. It's so funny you said it's so wide and varied because I'm like, that is just it's so narrowed down to what I was doing before, where I was kind of helping everyone with everything.
Oh,
And so yeah, but no, I agree. It does seem like it's a lot, but it actually, interestingly enough, is does these all these conditions for the most part require a very similar protocol. I mean, there are some deviations from the protocol, but like I said, for the most part, you are really focusing on, how do you balance your blood sugar and why is that necessary? And then, of course, what about your liver and your gallbladder? How does that affect your hormonal health? And then if your gut health, how does that affect it? And so I go through a step-by-step process with my clients using sort of like scientifically proven evidence-based protocols as well as sort of the woo-woo out there things as well, because I think that having a combination is really important, and some women are just like, wait, what do you want me to do? So they much prefer the science-based aspect, and so I really try to combine both so that there's something for everyone.
mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, one day I feel like I'm gonna start a show like that's totally embracing woo woo, because I feel like it's kind of funny, because I feel like anything that kind of gets into the spiritual aspect, or relaxing, focusing on de-stressing, or anything like that, it's getting a bad rap, but you're doing it anyways because it's working. So so we may as
Yeah,
well embrace
exactly.
it.
So true. Agreed. I know. I think that we are becoming more open as a society to those things, but it's taking some time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So, of course, one of the issues kind of that is at the root or at the heart of all of these different period related concerns is hormone balance. And so maybe you could talk a little bit about why it's important, and what role does an imbalance of hormones kind of play in some of these period related issues.
Yeah. The first thing I want to say is that I think hormones have a pretty bad rap these days. I feel like they're almost a four-letter word. And I think it's really, it's a matter of starting to reframe that a little bit and starting to think of your hormones as pretty much governing everything that happens within your body, almost 98% essentially. And so when there is an imbalance, you're going to feel it in some place in your body or in your life. I mean, whether that's a physical symptom or an emotional symptom where you're just, you're constantly crying all the time, or you can't handle stress well, or you're depressed, all of that ties back to your hormone balance. And so I think that it's really crucial for us to understand that when your hormones are imbalanced, it's going to negatively impact you, and it's not ideal by any means. So you really want to be focused on keeping your hormones as balanced as possible. But the point is that with a hormonal imbalance, it doesn't happen easily. It just happens over a long period of time, and we don't really see it. So we just don't see the symptoms. They tend to be subclinical, meaning that you don't really see them on blood work. You might be feeling a couple of things, but then over time you just think, oh, that's normal, or other people are experiencing it. So you then think, okay, it's normal. And so for most people, it's just a matter of, okay, what is it that I'm feeling right now that just doesn't feel right? And for the most part, women, especially women, we've lost this ability to really tune in and check in with our bodies and listen to what our bodies are saying. And it's not, it's no fault of ours. It's just that we're never really taught that. So we don't have any idea what it is our body or how our bodies are communicating to us. And instead, we just sort of take our bodies to the doctor and hope they'll fix them, but that just doesn't work after a certain age. At least that's what I've noticed in my experience and in the experience of many of my clients.
Mm-hmm. And one of the things that I've talked about a lot on the show is the importance of your menstrual cycle as an indicator of your overall health. And so when you suppress your menstrual cycle with a hormonal contraceptive, I mean, you're basically kind of shutting down the alarm system. So your fire alarm can actually go off if it's suppressed. And so there's issues there that are not coming up.
Oh, yeah. Oh my gosh. I love that. It's so true. I mean, that's the problem for so many of us is that we're on the pill and you're essentially shutting down the conversation between your brain, your ovaries, maybe even your thyroid. And so once that conversation is shut down for a certain amount of time, and you potentially come off the pill, it's very difficult to get it going again for a good number of people. And so I agree with you completely. It is just a matter of how do we tune back in when we're off of these hormonal birth control pills or other kinds of hormonal birth control.
Mm-hmm. Well, and we're going to talk a lot about some of these period-related issues in a bit more detail. And I was thinking that maybe before we kind of go there, maybe we could talk about what a healthy period would be like. Um, so we kind of have a baseline because we're always talking about problematic periods. So when you're working with clients and they're able to heal their menstrual cycles, what does that look like?
That's such a great question. I never ever get asked that. I know it's good to start that way, I think. So for most women, ideally, you're looking for a period that's about 3 to 5 days long, preferably 5 for most women. That would be good. Anything less than 3 days indicates to me that you likely have some kind of low estrogen, low testosterone, low progesterone state, or you're in that kind of state. And anything more than that is a state of excess, typically excess estrogen in relation to progesterone. So 3 to 5 days, you really want your period to be a bright red, sort of fresh red color. If it's dark brown, that's a sign of stagnation, of of old blood that's not coming out properly, that kind of thing. If it's too light, as in if it's, like a pinkish color, again, that indicates too little estrogen. So you're just not having enough estrogen to build up your lining. So that's basically the color you want it to be. You don't want it to be clumpy. So you want it to be almost like the consistency of a watered down syrup almost. So you don't want it to be clumpy because if it is, again, that's a sign of excess estrogen and excess hormones. And potentially other things as well. So it should just be a pretty even consistency, not lots of lumps and clumps, and that the color I described as well as the length. And then also, you want your cycle to be anywhere between 25 and 35 days. 25 days, if it is 25 days, you want it to stay consistently around that time. And if it's 35 days, then you want it to stay consistently there too. Ideally, I really like to see a cycle between 28 and 31 days. That to me seems like the healthiest cycle that I've seen so far. If it's 25 days one month and 35 days another month and then 26 days the next month, that likely indicates that there is a hormonal imbalance and something's happening that is causing ovulation to either come too soon or be delayed on a month-to-month basis. So you really want it to stay consistent with whatever the time frame it is. And so that's ideally like what women should be looking for, I think. I think that's a good start.
Absolutely. And that's one of the things I like focusing on, not necessarily focusing on, but touching on throughout the episodes that I've recorded, because I feel like this is just not some, even if you were to ask your doctor what a healthy cycle is, you probably wouldn't get a very thorough answer,
Yeah.
other than like 28 days. And I think it's important for women to know that a little bit of fluctuation is normal, but of course we have to kind of monitor how much it's fluctuating. Like you said, 25, 35, 47. These are issues that you might want to look into a little bit further.
Yes.
And so one of the kind of areas that you focus on is amenorrhea. So like, I lost my period. Where did it go? What's going on? So maybe you could talk a little bit about that. What causes amenorrhea, or what some of the factors are in that issue?
Yeah, for sure. I know I just launched a program on it, and it's been a big focus of mine for the last 3 months because, well, really for the last couple of years, because so many women are experiencing it. And the number one cause I'm seeing right now is the use of the birth control pill or another form of hormonal birth control, but mostly the birth control pill, especially the low dose birth control pills. And so what we've been led to believe is that low dose birth control pills are better than the higher dose ones that we used to take originally. Unfortunately, they're not, because, and the reason is because many of us require more hormones than the pill actually gives us on a daily or monthly basis to function optimally. And so if you're on a pill and you're getting a certain amount of estrogen or progesterone, per day, what happens is if your body is needing more, you're going to be operating at a deficit. And that just is 1 month. If you multiply that by 10 years, you can imagine the damage that is done. And so that's the first thing. And then the second thing is that like I was saying, it's turning off the conversation between your hypothalamus, which is in your brain, and your ovaries. So every month your hypothalamus is talking to your ovaries and telling your ovaries to build an egg up and release it. But that conversation goes away completely. So that's no longer happening. And so your body produces a series of series of hormones, estrogen and progesterone in particular, in that process. And so you're not producing those hormones there. So you're solely dependent on this pill. And when we come off of the pill, that conversation can take a long time to start back up again. And for some people, it actually doesn't ever start back up again, which is, very rare, but it does happen, which is really heartbreaking because, of course, there's so much regret and anger and all of these other emotions that women feel. And so what I've seen is that typically it takes about 3 months to about 3 years, depending on the person's circumstances, for them to get their period back. It also can be exacerbated by low body weight or low body fat, as well as undereating, which can cause that, obviously, and overexercise. And so I'm seeing a lot of that combination. It's almost like a triad of the low body weight or the undereating, as well as the exercise and the birth control pill. So it's a combination of those things. And those are the biggest causes I'm seeing. There are definitely others, but those are my main ones for right now.
I think, yeah, you touched on so many important topics there. And I think the over exercising one is interesting. It kind of stands out because, of course, every magazine you pick up, every girl is super skinny, and exercise is important and it's healthy, but it obviously can be taken too far. And
Yeah.
I'm not sure that that's something that everyone necessarily knows. You kind
No.
of hear that, if you're like an Olympic athlete, that some of those, women lose their period, but you probably wouldn't think that would apply to you, if you're just going to the gym 6 times a week.
Right. Yeah, but it does. I mean, it's really incredible. Women are, they'll run whatever, 5, 10 kilometers a day, 5 or 6 times a week, and they can absolutely lose their periods. And they don't even connect the two. And so much of it is, I think that, like you just said, it's so ingrained in our society that we have to be thinner and we have to have this perfect body, and every bit of us has to be toned and firm and all this nonsense. And it just drives me crazy because I feel like, how can we possibly live up to these ideals that are, created by, I don't know. I mean, I feel like magazines, for the most part, create these images now. I mean, what is a model? The model doesn't even look like what she really looks like in real life anymore. It's incredible. And she is thin. And
But
so
she's
it's
not thin
someone
enough
else.
because they still airbrush
Right.
her.
Exactly. I know. And so that's an impossible ideal to live up to. It really is. And so we continue to strive for something that will never happen, and we'll live in that place of constantly wanting it. And I see it so much with women who are coming to me saying that, they really want to get pregnant, or but they just want to get their periods back, and they don't want to give up the exercise because they'll put on weight, or they don't want to start eating more healthy fat because they will put on weight. And yeah, it's just heartbreaking because it's almost like we have to have a bit of a paradigm shift.
Well, and I think that part of that is the idea that the only way to be thin is to kind of reduce the amount of food you eat and up the exercise. And I think that obviously that's not the only way to lose weight, but people don't know that. And so,
Yeah, exactly.
generally speaking, if someone is their goal is to lose 20 pounds, what are they going to do? They're going to go on some sort of restrictive diet and then exercise more. And there's different ways to lose weight, obviously, that don't involve restricting your food a lot about what you eat, but this is something that's not yet mainstream, I think.
Agreed. I could not agree more. I think that that is a big problem as well, because we do think that these ailments that we have, are these hormonal imbalances, will be cured by eating less and exercising more. And I don't believe that for a second. And I feel like I'm proof of that, and many of my clients are as well. It's a matter of actually shifting that perception and reframing it a bit, and saying, okay, well, I can actually eat more, um, and I won't put on weight necessarily. It's just because when your body's in that state of starvation, it's gonna hold on to everything it can, and so it's gonna feel that like you can't lose weight at all, but it's not the case. And
Yeah.
there's a whole hormonal interplay happening too, of course.
Yeah. And I'm guessing that when you're starving, your body is not really thinking about making babies, because I'm guessing that would probably be a bit stressful on your on your system.
Yeah. Well, it's
Just to guess.
actually, yeah. I mean, no, totally, right? I mean, that's something that makes so much sense as well. And I think that women don't even realize that. And I say this all the time, is that if you're in a state of, if your body perceives this as danger. I mean, your adrenals think like you're living 10,000 years ago. They haven't caught up to this modern way of living. And so if your adrenals sense that there is external stress, or even internal, caused by food, like the wrong foods that you're eating for your own metabolism, or not enough food, your adrenals immediately sense danger. And the first thing that they shut down is your ovarian function, because they know, because they are looking out for you, but they know that this is not a safe time to get pregnant or have a baby. So the first thing to stop is how your ovaries function. And that's why we're plagued with, these irregular periods or no periods at all. I mean, it's fascinating to me. And the second thing to shut down is your digestion, because again, you don't really need your digestion either to run away from some scary beast, right? You want to divert all your blood to your heart and to your limbs, and not to your ovaries and your digestion. So if we stay in this state of chronic stress all the time, which, by the way, our ancestors maybe had stress like we have, once a month, and we have it 30 times a day,
Yeah.
essentially. So it's just like, of course, our whole system is going to shut down. And running is actually one of those things that raises cortisol levels and creates that sense of danger within your body. So I always urge the ladies, like, slow down on the running, and the CrossFit, because it really might not be serving you.
Yeah, it's just like a tragic irony right there, that you're trying to do something so healthy for your body, but it turns out that it's kind of mucking up your hormones in a way that you didn't expect.
Totally.
And so when you're working with clients then who are in this exact situation, amenorrhea, they're trying to get their periods back, what are some of the suggestions that or how you work with them in terms of diet or in terms of lifestyle changes that they can make?
Yeah, there's a lot that women can do, which I think is really awesome. So that's the good thing to know, is that there's lots of help out there, and there's a lot you can do. The first thing I really feel for women who are dealing with amenorrhea is that they're likely very nutritionally deficient. And so it's a matter of, how do we rebuild that foundation that has probably been knocked down a little bit. And so for me, the first thing is, okay, let's get some more of the good fats into your diet. And that can be, it can be anything. It can be just adding avocado to one meal a day if you aren't doing that already, kind of thing. So it's really just meeting someone where they're at and really focusing on what can they do in terms of baby steps. So adding in more good fat to your diet. So the healthy fats, especially omega-3s, because those are precursors to hormones. So they're really a building block for your hormones. And that would be fatty fish, something like salmon. So having that 1 or 2 times a week, if that's not something you're doing, adding in coconut products like coconut oil and coconut butter, avocado, like I said, and then some nuts and seeds, things like flaxseed, and because flaxseed is an estrogenic food, so it can potentially help to build estrogen in some women. At least that's what I've seen anecdotally, and there's a little bit of evidence. Potentially even some soy, like fermented soy products, that helps as well. So these kinds of foods, the fat-based foods, are really crucial, I think. And the second thing is, how can you include nutrient-dense foods like leafy greens and lots more veggies and sweet vegetables like root vegetables? All of those kind of have a grounding property to us. And I think women with amenorrhea tend to be like really type A, very stressed. We take on the world. This is my archetype. This is what I continue to see over and over again. And it's fine. I get it. Everybody's trying to be a perfectionist, but it's a matter of, okay, I cannot control this. So how can I surrender to this? And I think a lot of that it's a very emotional thing, but at least you can control the food and what you are consuming. And that way, it really helps to start to build up. The thing is, I think people need to realize, though, is that this takes a good amount of time. You really have to think about how long you were on the pill for, or how long you've been struggling with maybe an eating disorder or disordered eating, or how long were you a professional athlete for, because there are lots of women who are dealing with that, like you were saying. And really think about, okay, if it's been 10 years, then give yourself at least a month per year that you've been dealing with this, and kind of go from there and practice having a lot of love and patience and kindness towards your body, because she's got your back and she's doing what she's supposed to be doing. It's just a matter of letting her go, trusting the process almost, and letting her do what she needs to do.
I feel like as a result of the medical model of go to doctor, get prescription, take pill, I feel like it's kind of hard when you do realize that this is something that takes time. And going back to one of the things you said in the introduction was that you often work with women who are just trying to fix their periods and just trying to kind of restore their fertility, because on some intuitive level, they know that if their periods are messed up when they're ready to have a child, it's going to be harder. And I think that puts you in a prime position, because a lot of what I talk about on the show as well is the importance of changing our mindsets from get off pill, try to have a baby the next day, because that's where we're at. If you go to your doctor and you say, how long before I want to have kids, should I go off the pill? The doctor will say, well, just go off the pill. Most doctors wouldn't really suggest even to take a 3-month, 6-month, 12-month window to restore those nutrients, as you mentioned, and to really heal your cycle and get all that synthetic stuff out of your body. And so I just think how great of a position that you're in to help women just to fix the period part. And they're not even necessarily trying to have babies yet. That's amazing.
Agreed. Oh my goodness. I know. It's amazing to me how many doctors say that, and women who then subsequently go off the pill and get pregnant right away. There's evidence, I found this relatively recently, of the fact that women who do come off the pill and get pregnant right away are much more at risk for having premature birth, and as well having underweight babies and various other things. I mean, and almost across the board, every woman I know who's gotten pregnant after coming off the pill has had a preterm labor, and a number of them have even almost lost their babies. It's incredible. So there is really something to be said for letting your body take a break, like you said, getting all the synthetic hormones out of your body, as well as really rebuilding your nutritional stores, because it takes a lot to build a baby. I mean, a lot of protein, a lot of fat, a lot of things.
Where do all those bones come from?
Yeah, exactly.
It sounds so silly, but seriously though, where do they come from? They come from what we put in our mouths.
Oh yeah, so good. I love that you just said that. Where do those bones come from? That is so brilliant. totally have to quote you on that one.
But the funny thing about that statement is honestly, because I have a 2-year-old, and it didn't occur to me until after I birthed him that, right? Because it was like I actually needed the visual. Like he
Yes.
actually came out of me, and I was kind of like, where did you come from?
No joke.
You can read about it in a book, but when you actually birth a baby, you look at the baby and you're like, holy crap, like, where did you come from? And then I realized that when I was eating pizza and like whatever, because a lot of the shifts I've made personally in my own diet, it's from after having him. There's nothing like having a child to kind of snap you out of whatever and really make you look at stuff because you want to know what to feed your baby, what's the best thing for them. And it really, I think a lot of women find themselves in a similar situation to me where all of a sudden you really get motivated to find out about health, nutrition, and how it all works.
Yeah, I love that. It's really funny, isn't it? How having a baby totally changes everything.
Yeah, like I don't know, I had to actually see it to figure it out, but at least I did.
And here you are talking about periods.
That's right. Well, I guess going back to periods a little bit, one of the other issues, obviously, that I'm sure a lot of women come to you for is pain. So, dysmenorrhea, the pain associated with menstruation, and that's what drives, what not necessarily, well, I guess drives women to be on the pill, but also keeps them on the pill, understandably. And so, maybe you could
Mhm.
talk about some of the causes or just the factors that you've seen in painful periods.
Yeah, painful periods. Oh my goodness. It's been the bane of my existence. It was for years and years. And I think for so many women, like you said, I mean, there are bazillions of us dealing with this. And I think it comes back to a number of things. It can be a food-based, like a nutritional profile thing where you're lacking in certain nutrients. It can be a structural thing where your uterus is either tilted or out of place, which can actually happen. And as a result is, has to work a lot harder to get blood out. So there's excessive cramping. And it could be an inflammation thing, which is linked to nutrients, obviously, but it could be an inflammatory response that's happening too. There are these little chemicals called prostaglandins, and they're higher in some women than in other women. And so as a result, it could be those, or it could be one of those, or a combination of those. And ultimately, with nutrition, there's a lot that one can do. I mean, you really want to think about cutting out the real inflammatory foods, and those are well known at this point, but I'll just reiterate them for the sake of doing it. But essentially, we're talking about gluten, we're talking about refined sugar, corn, soy, what else? Those are the main ones. And sometimes even red meat for some people, because that just doesn't agree with not with everyone. So I would say those ones are the big ones to consider cutting out if you are experiencing a lot of pain with your cycle, because just so everyone knows, you should not have pain with your period at all. Like maybe a little twinge here and there, a couple cramps, that's fine. But if it's to the point where it's disrupting your life, then I mean, you have to really start to think, okay, like how much is this disrupting my life every month, and how much times that by 12? So then you think about how much is disrupting your life on a yearly basis, and then on a lifelong basis. I mean, that's a lot of time that you're losing to something that you really shouldn't be losing time to. So that's the first thing. And then the second thing with the structural aspect. So a lot of times, we fall down as kids, or we have to have some kind of procedure, surgical procedure, or anything like that. And what can happen is your uterus is attached to the pelvic bones, or the bones around your uterus, by like 8 or 12, like 8 different ligaments, I think, maybe 12. I can't remember, but there are some ligaments there. And so ultimately, if your pelvis is off, for instance, or you have back problems, it can absolutely affect where your uterus is, where it sits. And for mine, like I have one of these tilted uteruses, and so it has always been an issue in terms of like feeling physical pain every month. And so I've done a lot of work around that, and it's gotten tremendously better. But it is one of those things that it's always kind of a work in progress. So I really think that physical side of things, women can do mine abdominal massage therapy. That is basically a massage for your uterus, and it's external, just so you know, but it really, really helps. And there are a number of other things too. Chiropractic really works to make sure that your whole body is in alignment, all kinds of different massage. There's a lot of things. And in terms of using heat as therapy as well, using a hot water bottle, using a castor oil pack, all of those are really effective as well. So there are lots of things women can do. It's just a matter of finding what works.
And you had mentioned earlier that one of the catalysts for you entering this field was your with acupuncture, your experience with
Yes.
acupuncture.
Yes, forgot to mention that too. That's another brilliant one. It helps so much. Can't believe I forgot that one. Glad you reminded me. Yes, acupuncture is incredible.
Well, and I think it's so important for to have these options because, of course, I always say when I was 15 or 16, I didn't know anything about acupuncture. I lived in a small town. I guess I could blame that, but I really just I didn't know about these options. I don't think there was a naturopath in town. Like I don't remember. And it just these things were not really options that were on my radar. And if they had been, I was a smart enough kid, I would have looked into those things. And I think that that's a thing. So many of us are put on the pill when we're so young, and that decision is made for us, and you don't really have the opportunity to look into it, and it's kind of handled, so you don't really want to rock the boat until you have to because you know what's going to happen when you stop taking the pill. So it's good for women to know that there's different options out there that actually work.
For
That's key.
sure. Yes.
One of the things I wanted to talk about a little bit is kind of the negative impact of excess sugar consumption and kind of what kind of role that can play in our menstruation, because I know you've written a few articles about just sugar and insulin and that type of thing. So what role does eating too much sugar or consuming too much sugar kind of play in messing up our periods?
Yeah, that's so good. It's funny. I think I spent years trying to figure out how the cupcakes and the cookies and things were actually equaling a problem period. And I just couldn't for the life of me figure it out. So I was on a mission to figure out what was going on internally so that I could understand how it was manifesting as all these period problems. Anyway, I came back with insulin. And so for everyone who doesn't know, insulin it's a hormone. It's a very powerful hormone that one should not really mess with. And it's a storage hormone. So that's something to keep in mind for when I continue to talk about this. But ultimately, insulin production is triggered by blood sugar or sugar in our blood. And when we have too much sugar, we have too much insulin. And over time, those high levels of not only the sugar in our blood, but also the insulin can really mess with our other hormones. So insulin raises cortisol because they just work hand in hand. So once insulin is raising cortisol over and over again, cortisol is pushing down your levels of progesterone and sometimes even estrogen. And so what then happens is we have low progesterone, meaning that we are unable to have a regular period, or we may not even have a period at all. And then what happens after that is it also messes with our thyroid, because if we don't have enough progesterone, we might not make enough thyroid hormone. So there's a whole cascade of hormonal craziness happening within us if we have these elevated levels of insulin all the time over long periods of time. And so that's what I think women need to understand, is that if we are not keeping our blood sugar stable, at least as consistently as possible, then we really run the risk of having all of these hormonal issues. A big part of that too is that, our livers play a really big role in hormone function and creation and metabolization and whatnot. And so if we have too much sugar in our food, in our bodies, then our livers get all backed up and they don't know what to do. They're busy cleaning up the sugar mess, and they can't really do, or the liver can't do what it's supposed to do, which is the things it does is break down excess hormones. So we end up with this excess of estrogen in our bodies. And so there's all of these things happening. So I think that is ultimately the goal for women, is to think about how can I maybe take out the sugar or move away from my potential sugar addiction.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think that since so many people eat kind of a reduced fat diet, it's not like you have that many options of what to eat. So if you're not eating any fat, you're going to end up eating more carbohydrates because there's only so much protein you can eat. So that would probably go right back to the importance of having a good balanced diet and make sure that fat is actually a part of it. Healthy fat, of course.
For sure. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And one of the other, I actually saw a really interesting post that you posted recently about the impact that antibiotics can have on the menstrual cycle. And I thought that was interesting because I think that if you were to do like a survey on the street and go around with a microphone and ask people what impact antibiotics have on their menstrual cycle, they'd be like, "What are you talking about?" Because it's
I
not
know.
something that, you hear a lot.
No, never. I mean, nobody even thinks about that, but there definitely is a correlation to hormonal imbalances and consistent antibiotic use. Even just one use of antibiotics can really mess with you. And the way I see it happen or manifest the most is with gut problems, because antibiotics, what people don't realize is antibiotics are not only killing the bad bugs, but they're also killing all the good ones. And for anyone who's been paying attention to research lately or just the news in general, talk of the gut health and the microbiome, which is your gut organisms, is really huge right now, and it's going to change the way we do medicine for sure. But it's just sort of in its infancy right now, and of course, all the health and wellness people are talking about it, and the mainstream medical doctors aren't so much just yet, but they'll get there. But the point is that you have to maintain a proper functioning gut microbiome in order to have any kind of good health, whether that's hormonal health or your overall health. And so antibiotics are dangerous in that regard because they are killing everything off. And if you don't have the right gut bacteria, you're setting yourself up for all kinds of problems. I mean, research and studies have found that your gut bacteria is linked to the way you think and the way you feel, your mental and emotional health. I mean, anxiety is now linked to it, all kinds of issues. So if you find that you have to have antibiotics, I highly recommend taking a lot of probiotics and eating a lot of probiotic rich foods as well with it if you really have to take an antibiotic. Otherwise, definitely refrain.
Hmm. Yeah, that's such good advice, and I think it's so interesting the information that's coming out. One of the things that I've read a lot lately is how the birth control pill actually alters your gut flora negatively. It kind of has an antibiotic effect on your gut, and then that as the mother, when you have your baby, you transfer your gut bacteria to your baby if you're breastfeeding, and so this has a really potentially far-reaching impact that we don't even really realize, and I think we're just starting to understand. And so even just getting that on people's radar, that it all works together, and that how important gut health is for our overall health, that's a really great place to start, because I don't know if people were talking about this like 20 years ago as much as they're talking about it now, that's for sure.
So true. I know. I mean, that was fascinating to me when I discovered that a baby's gut flora is completely populated by its mother, and that usually happens in the birth canal. And I mean, nobody knows that stuff. I
No.
mean, nobody knows about that. And what's really unfortunate is that if a mother has to have a C-section, then the baby's gut is populated by whatever bacteria is on the mother's skin. And so, of course, that can lead to a lot of problems later down the line. I mean, again, there's just a lot of emerging science showing that if that's not corrected, it can really lead to a lot of mental and physical issues for that baby as they get older. So I do urge any woman who has had to do a C-section or has questionable gut health, to really think about how you can populate your baby's gut bacteria with the good bacteria. And you can do that. There are definitely probiotics for babies as well. And so I think that's something to think about. It's fascinating though to me.
I know, it totally is, and kind of scary, but I guess the important thing is what can you do about it? And there's always something that we can do to improve our overall health or our gut health or period health. And so it's just about finding the information and trying to apply it into our lives. One of your older posts that I actually just recently shared on my Facebook page, which is very applicable to me as a Canadian in the middle of winter in the cold, where we're not getting any sunshine out here. So you have a post called Vitamin D, and you talk about the link between vitamin D deficiency and PCOS, and potentially even infertility. And you called vitamin D the period vitamin. So I thought that was really interesting. So maybe you could talk a little bit about how important vitamin D is for us, for our health and for our period health.
Oh yeah, that's so good. Full of good questions. Um, Yes, so vitamin D is like a hormone. It acts like a hormone, and it's basically a precursor to a number of different things. But essentially, women should start to think of it as a hormone because it's the only vitamin that can be made in the body. And it is, oh, it's so important. It's amazing. I had to call it the women's hormone because it's so crucial in so many of our different functions. But the PCOS link was really interesting to me in finding that a large swath of women who have PCOS are also vitamin D deficient. So again, that indicates to me that it's needed in many different processes within our bodies. And then of course, vitamin D, like I said, it's kind of a precursor. So it is needed for, all of these like making or helping to make hormones, helping to make sex hormones, and just in general, the proper functioning of our endocrine system for the most part. So, if you are deficient in vitamin D, I highly recommend getting tested. You really want your levels to be around 50, maybe even higher for some people, and just supplementing and basing your supplementation on where your levels are at. For me, in the wintertime, I take about 5,000 IU a day of liquid vitamin D, and that I seem to have lower levels of vitamin D, or predisposed to them in the wintertime at least. So it is a matter of just making sure that your levels are where they're supposed to be, because you will definitely see negative side effects if your levels aren't where they're like basically supposed to be.
I think that's important just to, again, to have it on your radar because from the studies that you cited in the article that you mentioned, it was a pretty significant correlation that such a large percentage of women who suffered from these issues had a vitamin D deficiency. So it doesn't mean that it causes it, but it means that it's definitely linked to the processes.
For
And
sure.
I'm sure it can't hurt to make sure we're getting enough vitamin D.
Definitely not.
And so one of the topics, we're not going to get to delve into this in like a huge amount of detail, but one of the topics that I did want to kind of touch on today is the birth control pill. And even just because one of the titles of your blog post is, well, I shouldn't have said that because I don't remember the exact name of it, but basically like why you should get off the pill right now. I'm paraphrasing, of course. So that's a pretty strong statement. So why do you feel so strongly that you wrote the title of your blog to be basically get off the pill?
Yeah, I know, right? I have a couple of them kind of like that, a couple of variations. I think, I don't know. I'm sure I'm going to get flack for this. I usually do. It's okay though. I figure I may as well just speak my mind. But I think ultimately there are millions of women who will go on the birth control pill without incident, and there will be no problems, and they will get off and carry on with life. They'll get pregnant, et cetera, et cetera. But for many other millions, and those are the ones I'm seeing, this is my experience, especially in my work, uh, that is not the case. And so there are myriad side effects. And that to me is just not acceptable, because the first thing is that no, we're, like you said, we're put on the pill at this really young age where we don't really make the decision to do it. We're kind of just told to do it, and we don't, I don't know, we don't really have any decision making power at that age usually. So we're just, we just do what our doctors or our parents tell us to do. And so that's the first thing. So women come off of it when they can make a decision about their health, and they're enraged that they were put on this pill that has really screwed them up. And I really, I say that kind of loosely, but it really has. Every area of their bodies, whether it's their liver function or their gut health or their skin, their hair falling out, their fertility, their periods, everything. And so that's what I'm seeing. So for me, my opinion is that, yeah, there are so many of us who are on the pill and we don't need to be on it. And I think many of us are on it because, well, I think it's like even 40% of women who are on the birth control pill, they are on it for, well, 40% of women who are on it are basically on it for reasons other than birth control. And to me, again, that signifies that women's bodies don't function without drugs. And that's just not the case, because we're now sending a message that we're somehow broken and need to be fixed. And I have a huge problem with that, because I think that that is not the case at all. And women need to understand what's going on in their bodies so that they can make decisions from a place of empowerment, not a decision based on fear. And for many women, they go on the pill because they're terrified of getting pregnant, because they've been told that this is, basically that's the only reason you would go on the pill, is that you like the fear, it's like the fear of death when it comes to getting pregnant. But then, I see the flip side of women in their 20s and 30s who come off and all they want to do is get pregnant. And they've spent 15 years trying to avoid it and they can't. So that's the cruel irony there, is that it just goes from one extreme to the next. But if we empower young women, especially teenagers, with knowledge about how their bodies are truly functioning, and an understanding that they can literally only get pregnant 1, maybe 2 days a month, then they wouldn't need to be on a pill every single day of the month to prevent something that is relatively easy to prevent.
Yeah.
So that's my spiel.
Yeah, I'm sure I could talk about this all day, but there's just so many issues that I see with the pill. And of course, the issue that so many women experience, a painful and problematic menstruation, is not being addressed. It's not addressed by the pill. So I'm not afraid to say that, because it's not. It's a temporary solution, but when you go to a doctor or whoever for a problem, what do you really want? Like, what you really want is a solution. And we're trained to go to the doctor to get the pill to make the pain go away. But what we really want is to be healthy. Healthy bodies don't give you excruciating, debilitating pain every month. That is going back to my lovely metaphor about the alarm system. Like, that's your alarm system. It's telling you something's wrong. And so I feel like, and I don't know if there's anyone who's listening who's had a similar experience to me, but I remember I think I was sent to a specialist because I had questions about my menstrual health and stuff. And I remember asking the specialist about what I could do, because my periods were really long at the time, because I have a thyroid issue. And so this was before it was more or less addressed. And so my periods used to be like 45 days on average, 47 days between periods. So anyway, so I'm talking to this specialist about what I can do to kind of make my periods go back to normal. And he basically looked at me and was like, there's nothing you could do. And so basically, right? And so I left his office and that was it. And so I guess I feel like, what do you really want? Like, why are you going to the doctor? If you have a problematic period or some sort of menstrual issue, what you want is a solution. And the medical profession is not providing it. And so it's women like you and all of the women who are kind of taking it upon themselves to educate about hormonal health and menstrual health that are really going to be the ones to make a difference. And then maybe in 30 years, the doctors will wake up and make it part of the curriculum.
Absolutely.
Like, I don't know.
Amen, sister.
I don't know what's going on there, but yeah.
So true. It is. It's just a Band-Aid. And that's what is the most unfortunate thing about all of this, is that it's just a Band-Aid and it's really just covering up your symptoms. For me, I'm a perfect example of that. I went on the pill. Suddenly, I didn't really have heavy or irregular periods anymore. But with that came severe gut problems, chronic yeast and urinary tract infections, really bad joint pain at 21 years old, a terribly low sex drive. I mean, I basically never wanted to have sex, and I was in my early 20s. I mean, that is not normal. And like my hair started falling out, my skin, I started to get all this discoloration on my skin. All of these things started to happen to me. And then I was chronically sick. I had a cold like every other week. So I knew for sure that it was not meant for me. And I think that is really for women to do. You have to use your discernment when it comes to making these kinds of decisions about your health, because just going on a pill or some kind of random drug, you really just have to do your own research, because you're the only one who is going to care as much about your health as you do. There won't be anybody else. And that's unfortunate, but that's just the truth.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, obviously, I've been on the pill, like I was on it when I was younger. So this isn't about passing judgment. There's obviously, the pill is right for a lot of women at certain points of their life. So this isn't about that, but it's more, if you're going on it, at least you should know this stuff and know the potential side effects. If you know the side effects and you choose to go on it, at least you know, right? And then you're making an informed decision. And then maybe that would change how long you stay on it, because you know. But if you don't have the information first, which we don't when we're going on it when we're like 14, then you're not really making an informed decision. So before we
Yes,
go any
it's so
further,
true. I know, right? I feel like we could talk about this
yeah,
forever. It's so
before
true.
we go down that road, I'd love to close the interview just with a few questions that I ask my guests. And so the first question I'd like to ask is, what would you say is the most common myth or misconception about fertility that you would like to see corrected?
Hmm. There's so many. Uh, I would say the biggest thing is that I see is that women are told that they have a certain condition or their blood work is their blood test results are a certain way, there are certain numbers, and that there's nothing they can do. And you just mentioned that that happened to you as well. And I want women to know that there's so much you can do. There's so much that you can do. You can take action in your own life and with your own health to change those numbers. You can absolutely change your blood test results. You can absolutely heal yourself from polycystic ovarian syndrome. I've seen it over and over again. I mean, so many women tell me they've got PCOS. It's like it's life sentence, and they're told they can never have kids naturally and all these things. And I just want women to know that you can absolutely empower yourself, and knowledge truly is power. And once you have an understanding of what it is your body needs and you give it to her, she will show up for you in remarkable ways.
Brilliant. I
Mm.
love that. And what would you say is the biggest misunderstanding or misconception about menstrual health or women's hormonal health, again, that you'd like to see overturned?
I think one of the biggest things with that is that doctors don't listen to women when they're explaining that they have certain symptoms or issues, and they're kind of just sent off saying, "Oh, everything's fine. Like your test results are normal. Everything's normal." I feel like all I've done, by the way, is bash doctors, and I don't mean to. I'm just saying that this is what I see, and I would love for women to be able to make decisions that are really helpful for them. But ultimately, they're told everything's normal and they should just go on with life, and they feel inherently intuitively that things are not normal and not right. And I want women to go with that, to really start to tune into that intuition, because that voice is there. It's just that we've suppressed it for so long, and we have no idea what our body is actually signaling to us, because we don't really know how to read or how to interpret the language that our bodies are speaking in. And so it is just a matter of learning to do that, and checking in consistently, and knowing that if you are experiencing symptoms, that it's likely that there is an underlying problem there, and it's just a matter of trying to figure out what that is. And it requires some work and some research, but it's so worth it to really know, and to know that this is not something that's a life sentence, and that you can really do something about it.
Okay, and one last question before I get you to tell the listeners all about the program that you have. At the beginning of the show, you kind of mentioned how there's kind of a spiritual aspect to what you teach, the kind of woo-woo angle. So I would love to kind of close with some of those suggestions that you make to women that aren't, science-y, eat this food type of thing.
Yes. Oh my goodness. Oh, here it goes. Okay. So I really think one of the biggest things is that we need to actually talk to our bodies and have a whole conversation with them. Even if you sound like a complete crazy person, trust me, your body is listening to you. She hears everything you say, whether that's positive or negative. Because think about it. If you have this negative internal dialogue going for years on end, you physically manifest that. And if you switch that up a little bit, it is, again, amazing, like I said, how your body will show up for you. And so I think for many of us, what we can start to do is to literally lay your hands on your ovaries, and even if you're in bed at night, 5 minutes, and just say, I trust you, body. I know that you're loyal to me, and you have my best interest at heart always. And reciprocate that, because when you're doing these things to yourself, whether that is over exercising or under eating, or eating not foods that aren't going to serve you or make you feel good, cake and cookies and all these fun things, fun at the time, I think that we're not really being loyal to our bodies, and our bodies will always be loyal to us. So it's a matter of really checking in and listening for the signals. And so I think hands on the ovaries, thinking, just sort of envisioning like a bright light, like a bright golden light, that your body is wrapped in that your ovaries are wrapped in that. I love that. I think that that's like the simplest, least woo-woo thing you can do.
I think that's I think that's fantastic. Because like you said, there's a lot of power in our thoughts. And so if you're always putting out negative thoughts about your body, about yourself, don't think it doesn't have an impact. So it really does. Yeah, you can change your life by changing your thoughts. And I'm embracing woo-woo. I'm good with it. Okay.
You're so funny. Agreed. Same here.
Awesome. Well, so for women who are listening and who are now super excited to find out more about your program and to work with you and to fix their periods, could you talk a little bit about your program and how we can sign up and get ourselves fixed?
You're so cute. I have a couple of different options, and I'm actually changing things up over the next couple of months. So we'll see how that all goes. But essentially, women can start with me by either doing one of my e-courses. So I have a Kickstart program that's 28 days long, and it really helps to kickstart your hormones, obviously. And that is really focused on food options, as well as gut healing and why your gut plays such a big role in your hormonal health, as well as supplementation and blood sugar balancing. So it's really just like a starter guide or a starter program for people who just want to get their hormones in balance in an easy way. And then I have another program. It's for PMS and painful periods, and that is an 8-week e-course. So it's bigger, it's more comprehensive. And that one really delves into a lot of the woo-woo stuff, as well as, period tracking and cycling and what really works for painful periods, what really works for physical and emotional PMS symptoms. And right now, I'd mentioned to you, I'm doing a live program. So it's closed, but it's for amenorrhea and irregular periods. So for women who are dealing with those conditions. And I'm really toying with the idea of potentially making that into an e-course as well, because I've had such a huge response to it and people really love it. So I think that I need to consider making that an e-course as well. So those are the options right now for people. And then over the year, pretty much I launch group programs, so live group programs like the one I just mentioned. And I will do another one for PMS and painful periods later in the year. So if people want to join and work with me live, that's another option for them too.
Awesome. And so your website is fixyourperiod.com?
It's actually NicoleJardim.com.
Okay.
But yeah, if you went to fixyourperiod.com too, you would also find information to contact me. It'll redirect people to Nicole Jardim.
Okay, perfect. So I'll put the links in the show notes for today's episode. And Nicole, I had such a fantastic time chatting with you today. Thank you so much for being on the show and sharing your wisdom, your knowledge, and your just wonderful energy. So I'm feeling really energized and excited. So thank you for that.
Thank you. Lisa, you're awesome. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so pumped to be on here with you and chatting with you. It's been so good.
Awesome. Thanks so much. Thank you for listening today. If you enjoyed today's show, I would love it if you shared it with a friend and helped to spread the word. If you haven't yet subscribed to the podcast, just search for Fertility Friday on iTunes or Stitcher and make sure to subscribe so that you never miss an episode. And of course, if you're loving the show, please stop by and leave an honest review on iTunes. Of course, a 5-star review would be awesome, but all of the reviews just help more people to find the show. And as for me, you can find me on Twitter at Fertile Friday. You can stop by the blog and leave a comment in the show notes for today's episode, which you'll find at fertilityfriday.com/Nicole. And you can also find me on the Fertility Friday Facebook page, which is facebook.com/fertilityfridays with an S. And as always, be well and happy charting.